Welcome back to Philosophy of the Barber. Today's guest is Andrew Maki, owner of Topstone Barber Company in Littleton, New Hampshire. He has been barbering for 6 years. He's owned Topstone for 5, starting off in New London and then opening in Littleton, and is now solely in Littleton. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, how's it going?
Can't complain so far. I get a steady stream of people I get to talk to every week, so
Yeah.
thanks for coming in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So usually how we start is the number one question that I am always curious with, which is how on earth you decided to become a barber.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of started out, so I did just about everything I could think of for a while. When I was like fresh out of high school, I went off to school for music education, playing the tuba, and decided that being a music teacher was not for me. And so I pieced out after about a semester, which, you know, you can point to about 1 million college dropout barbers out there representing the club. But then I went back home. I worked at Sears selling appliances for a while. Then I sold used cars. Then back to selling appliances. Then I worked at a tax office. Then I worked at a bike shop. I did building maintenance. And then I built cabinets for a little while. And while I was doing all that, I joined the National Guard, the 39th Army Band. So I still got my tuba fix for a little while. And in that time, because we were performing all the time, we really had to pay attention to our uniform regulations. So I was getting a haircut just about every week to, and I, just liked going in and getting a haircut. And it came time in my, early 20s that I was really thinking, okay, all these seasonal jobs, all this bouncing around is not a lifelong lifestyle for me. And I started pondering about what I wanted to do. One of the things I liked about sales and retail was talking to people, getting to know them, especially the challenge when I, worked at Sears and worked selling cars for a short while. My conscience couldn't take it. But I really like, talking to people, figuring out, something in common with them and figuring out how to build rapport and get to know them and all those things. But I didn't ever like, squeezing them for money and sizing them up and figuring out how to make them spend more than they wanted to spend. And so that's when I made the big switch to building cabinets, which was, kind of a manufacturing place in Claremont. And I was like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to talk to 1 million people every day. I don't want to be sizing everybody up. I'm just going to do a job where I go in, do my thing, get done. And that lasted like a year to the day, because the job was, throw earplugs in, run the machine, you've got your checklist, you do it all day, and you don't talk at all because it's heavy equipment and earplugs. You're not talking to anybody, and that's about enough to drive somebody like me just about insane to not be able to talk all day long. I go nuts. So I started talking with my barber when I was getting a haircut, and asked him. He was, I think, the fifth or sixth barber in his family, uncles and grandfathers and whatnot. And I was digging his job. I was like, man, it's cool to come in here. I like coming in here. Like, I could get paid to stand in here all day instead of just talk to him. And he told me about the barber school over in, I think I was 20 or something like that when he first told me about it. And I pondered, and then back to the idea in my head a few times. And then one day, actually, he was closed. I was headed to drill. We had a concert, and I couldn't go to my regular barber, Dave, in Claremont. And so I swung by. I found on Google Henniker Barbershop and Shave, and that's where I met Elizabeth, and got a haircut from her first time ever. And kind of mentioned, we talked music and stuff like that, and then kind of mentioned, I thought about being a barber, and she sold me. She had just gone through the school. I think she'd maybe owned the shop, buying from Dave, maybe 6 months or a year possibly. But at that point, she was like, "You gotta go. You gotta check it out. Dave's amazing. It's awesome. You gotta go." And so, I had already peeked around the website, but after hearing from a real person that went through the program and knew everything about it, I was like, all right, I got to go meet this guy. And I did, and pretty much a week later, I was signed up. I was in the school, and it was back when they were doing 6 days a week. So I pushed in my chips. I went 6 days a week. I moved, it didn't make sense. You can't get there from here, from Claremont to Pennacook. That's an hour and some odd. So I moved in above the barber school and lived upstairs, and basically, you could do 65 hours a week or 60 hours a week, I think, at that point. So cooked through school in like 4.5, 5 months, something like that. And didn't really have a concrete plan of where I was going to go afterward, but I got to the end, and Dave offered me a job at American in the basement, and I had told him I didn't want to do any disservice to him. I said I got a dream, open my own shop one day, but I kind of want to learn the ropes and figure it out. So as long as you're okay with that, and you're going to be okay if I have to or decide to peace out, let me know. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. He's, as everybody knows, he's always willing to give somebody a start. And
well, especially being up front like that, long-term goals going, hey, up front before we start, I want you to know where I'm headed and what I want to do here. And that way expectations are where they're supposed to be.
Exactly. And so, I started working with him, and, super grateful for all the people there that, they whip you into shape in that shop and really push you. You're thrown to the wolves in there.
So who'd you work with when it was down there? Because obviously there's quite the turnover.
Yeah, well, I worked with Dave's son, AJ. I worked with Zach. I worked with Ryan Paris, who now works up in Littleton with me. I worked with Joey. I worked with Tracy. Kind of, in my mind, they're the crew, of the last 4 or 5 years at least, there and beyond. I guess some of them have been there quite a while. But yeah, I worked with all those guys, and man, it goes from, barber school of, oh, you got potential, you'll figure it out, to, hey, do you hate your customer? Why'd you leave this long? And I'm like, oh man, I didn't realize I thought I was, it's middle school to high school. You're in middle school and you're an 8th grader and you're top dog, and you think, man, I'm awesome, I'm the best. And then you're suddenly a 9th grader again, and you're like, oh, I'm not any good.
Yes.
So, yeah, I did that. I was working 5 days a week, 4 or 5 in Concord, and an old family friend in Warner, New Hampshire, who had a barber shop, and she was looking for some help. So I did my other extra 2 days a week. I started up working with her in Warner, and that was I bought my chair that I used the whole time in barber school. I've got a 40s Padar that I love to death. I bought that off Dave, and I dragged it into her shop and set up a little station with a Craftsman toolbox like everybody does, and hung my mirror on the wall. I worked there 2 days with her, 4 or 5 with Dave, and then I was planning on doing that for a while. And it was probably, 4 or 5 months in, I was still kind of daydreaming about, opening my own shop, but I knew I wanted to hold off and not do it for a while. I wanted to kind of get my feet under me. And I was wandering around New London, I lived in Sutton, New Hampshire, so right next door. Wandering around New London, and there's this little hole in the wall. Somebody had told me, because I was dreaming about opening in New London. Somebody said, "Oh, there's the barber over in the strip mall there." And I was like, "There's no sign. There's nothing. You can't see that there's a barber in there." And so I went wandering up and down in that strip mall, and sure enough, I found a barber pole on the building. And I poked my head in the window, and there's a mirror and a station on the wall, and then there's just some tan, regular, 12 by 12 tile floors, and god-awful green, and some wood paneling on the walls. And there's the ring around the chair where somebody has clearly walked for a lot of years, but no chair, no anything. And there's a sign on the door, thanks for your continued support, blah, blah, blah. I've retired, Len. And so Lenny, the barber in New London, had retired. And so I was like, ooh, this place is open. Like, it was a barber shop. It's this little, it's 225 square feet, tiny little spot. So I was like, I got to jump on this. I got to see if there's any opportunity. So I went into the hardware store, which was closed. I had to bang on the door. This guy answered that, ended up becoming a customer. I was like, who's in charge of this building? Who do I contact? And he gave me the info. I called him right away. They were a big holding company down in Massachusetts. But I called him right away, and I was like, hey, I wanted to talk to you about Lenny's Barbershop. It looks like, he's shut down. I was wondering if you already had somebody that was interested in the space. And they're like, what do you mean? Lenny's still there? I was like, no, he's not. He's got a sign on the door. He's retired. And they're like, I think we've got to call him first. So I reported the news that Lenny had retired and there was a space for rent. So it was a little serendipitous that I happened to be moseying by and found that spot.
Yeah, who knows how long that sign was up before you got there.
Yeah, I know. It could have been 10 minutes, could have been, whatever. But yeah, so I lucked out. They said I could have the space, and it was sooner than anticipated. This was 5-6 months in, something like that. But I got the space, signed a lease on it. I actually went and, unfortunately Lenny had dementia, so he didn't have a lot of stories to tell, but I got to meet his wife, and she told me the whole history. He'd been in that spot since they built the strip mall. 43 years he stood right there in that 200 and some odd square foot space, which is, wild to me, to spend that long in one spot. Just the stories he must have, the grandkid he must have cut that became the grandfather that he cut,
Well, I'm sure it took exactly that long to put that U in the ground.
So yeah, I know. And I have a clean shop, but there's part of me that loves a good dirty barber shop when they have the head stains on them. It's gross, but it's like a gross bowling alley sometimes, like
it's one of those, it's nostalgic as long as you don't have to touch it.
It's nostalgic in the pictures. My shop does not look like that. We clean, but there's something about that, the shop still looks like it's 1972 in there. They've got this stack of magazines and newspapers, and it's like, maybe we ought to get rid of a few of those. No, there's a good one down at the bottom. That sort of feeling where it's like, ugh. But yeah, I got to hear some of the stories and see some pictures of. One of my favorite quotes was his wife. She's digging through newspaper clippings for me because I wanted to hang a picture of him in the shop. And she found this one of him in the 70s. He was bald and scraggly old man when I met him, but he had big curly hair and a mustache, curly brown hair. And she showed me this picture, and when she holds it up, she goes, "Oh, my Lenny was so fat back then." And I was like, "Oh." But yeah, it was cool digging up some memories of him to be able to kind of include him in the shop. And so when I got keys, I busted up the floors and put some black and white checkerboards down, and I used my cabinet building experience, and I built my barber stations in there, and I used the name. So Topstone Barber Company came about because my grandfather had a furniture company called Topstone Furniture in Claremont. They closed down in the 70s. They made terrible, ugly pine furniture. That's very nostalgic for me, but it is not something I would ever put in my house. But I used an old farm table that they had, big knotty pine farm table, and I cut it into my barber counters in the first shop and moved some chairs. And I had a really good family friend when I first opened. I was feeling really like motivated by Lenny's essence in that shop. I said, man, I can't wait. I'm going to stand in that shop just like him. Little space. It's going to be all mine. Just me. Maybe I'll do 45 years right in that spot was my thought when I was first opening. He said, come back to me in a year. And I was like, nah, I love it. Just it's my zone, my world. That's all I'm going to do. And he was right, because a year later we were up to 3 barbers. We had switched from walk-in only, cash only, to running by appointment because we were crazy busy. At the 1.5-year mark, that 250 square face that served us pretty well, but the wall was about 19.5 feet long that we had 3 stations on, and at 6 feet per station. We were pretty much elbow to elbow in that tiny little shop. So we moved into the basement of the New London Inn, and went into this quirky, weird basement space that had like 2 rooms and no idea what we were going to really do with it. And we put 4 stations in there. This was back in, 2016 sometime. We put 4 stations in there and put a cool little breakfast bar where people could sit and look into the room and talk with us while other people were sitting in the chairs getting haircuts. And then about a year after that, we had knocked out the extra walls in the barbershop side of that space, and we were up to 5 stations and 7 barbers kicking around in the basement of the inn, and it was just busier than we knew what to do with down there, which was really great. And on the other side, my cousin had owned a Mexican restaurant, so we stole the bar. He closed it down. We stole the bar out of his Mexican restaurant and put it on the other side, and we just had a spot where people would come in, chill and hang at the end of the day, end of their work day, and other people on the other side getting haircuts, and we didn't sell anything. It was just people would show up with a 6-pack and meet up, hang out, have a haircut, and have a beer, whatever, even if they weren't getting a haircut. So yeah, it was a really cool feeling, and that's kind of, I don't know. We then jumped on and decided to go open shop round 2 up in Littleton, New Hampshire. And that's where we are now.
So what prompted that opening?
I was daydreaming about a second space, and kind of thinking about, New London was a awesome town to start out in, and had a blast doing that. But we were kind of thinking we wanted a second shop, and I had enough guys at that point that I was like, okay, a few people stay here, a few of us will go up there, and that's what we did. But we'd been looking in the Upper Valley and places close, and it was actually Ryan, who'd been working with me in New London, that his family had a camp up in Concord, Vermont, which is kind of 45 half hour from Littleton. And he said, you should go check that town out, it's really cool. I was like, there's nothing up there. Growing up in the southern part of the state, I'm like, way up there, there's trees and Mount Washington and the Cog Railway, and other than that, I don't know what's up there. And it took one visit, actually, speaking to the same sort of serendipity. I had my Dickies Topstone jacket on, and I was wandering around an antique shop, my first ever visit in Littleton. And the guy that run the antique shop, that's become a friend now, pointed at me, he said, are you a barber? I was like, what? At first, not realizing I was wearing my barber shop jacket, but I was like, oh, yeah, I am. He's like, we need a barber shop in this town. You should open a barber shop in this town. And he did not know that I was visiting that town to think about opening a barber shop in that town. But I was like, man, if I'm going to walk around on Main Street and somebody's just going to point at me and say you should open a barber shop, I think that's a decent sign. I'll take that one.
Yeah, when they're asking for it, literally.
So, yeah, the second visit up there, I started poking around, and, people were really supportive. I had a few people that I met up there through a friend that ended up helping me find a space. So we've got a decent little space right in the heart of downtown, kind of tucked away, but, down a side street there. But they helped me find a space in there, and, yeah, it was a process figuring out opening up there, but all in all, I live now right across the street. I can see the barber shop from my dining room window. Just look out and yell to the guys while they're hanging, or go eat lunch upstairs and come back downstairs. But yeah, so we've been there. It's been 2 years now, just about.
So what made you finally decide to just close up the New London location and focus strictly on Littleton?
So this throw it in I call it the U.S. Army Academy of Lessons Learned. So, I daydreamed, and, like I said, we were looking in the Upper Valley and things like that, and that would have been, half hour, 45-minute drive or something between the two. And I definitely, Ryan and I went up to go kick off the Littleton shop, and I was working 1 day a week down in New London. We had a solid crew working down in New London. And eventually, I think, I definitely my attention was pretty well split between the two shops, trying to start one while we had some new barbers coming on in the first shop, it was
definitely a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot to juggle, that it got to the point, I relied heavily on the guys I had, but, they had an opportunity. I don't know, Danny and Ethan, and now my apprentice Jimmy, once we closed down the New London shop, is gone on with them. they decided his mother owns a hair salon in the area. They were going to do a tandem barbershop hair salon right nearby. And so he kind of came to me and said, hey, I've got this opportunity to work and do my own thing. And so, hey, he gave me good notice and went off and they started their own thing. And far be it for me to say anybody shouldn't do that, because that's exactly what I did. And that's what all of us do at some point. So spread your wings and fly.
Well, and good communication between, shop owner and barber is going, where do you want to go? And let you know, because you can't expect for people to stay with you forever.
Well, exactly. And so, he told me he was going to do that. And I was still, left with a pretty solid crew down in New London, but it meant me living up in Littleton kind of jumping on and going, okay, like if we're going to keep New London going and keep the same thing, then I have to be, 4 or 5 days a week down in New London. But I was living in Littleton. So I did it for, it was February or March of 19, that I was like, all right, I gotta jump in, be back in New London a fair amount, get my hands on in that shop. And so I was doing a 3-hour commute every day for 4 days a week, back and forth. And it wasn't until this one customer, I think, I don't remember who it was, but I think he ruined everything, because he said to me, man, 3-hour commute. I was like, yeah, it's not that bad. I throw on a podcast or something. I do some highway, and then I get off the highway, and there's, a great little spot. They do homemade donuts, and I stop and get one of those every now and then. He's like, but 3 hours a day? Will you do that 4 days a week? I was like, yeah, but, get 3 days up there. He's like, man, that's 12 hours a week. I was like, yeah. He's like, man, that's like 48 hours a month. He's like, what is that? That's almost a week. I was like, you need to stop right there. Please stop. What are you talking about? I'm spending... And so, that was definitely part of it, that I was like, man, I'm spending a week and a half or 2 weeks of my life in the car, just going to work. And so, it got to the point where it was the tail end of my lease down in New London. I had a few guys move on to go work over there, and I could see, it was a moment of, do I double down and, maybe move back now that, maybe my lease up there, or do I decide to focus in and take care of Littleton and spend my time up there. And it was a personal choice for me in a lot of ways, where I really love living up in the North Country. I kind of brag about it because I live on Main Street, but out my front door, in the summer I can go swimming in the river, I can go hiking, I can go mountain biking, great motorcycle riding up there. In the winter I can go cross country, downhill skiing, or snowshoeing right out the door. There's ice skating right there, and for every bit of that, I don't have to get in my car once. I can walk out the door with my mountain bike and go mountain biking. So
pretty much the entire selling point of moving to New Hampshire is right at your doorstep.
Yeah, exactly. Everything in the brochure is without even getting in the car for me up there. So quality of life wise, and the things that I really enjoy, that for me, they were right up there. So when it came weighing the list of pros and cons and what I wanted to do, I was like, I really want to focus in on staying in the North Country, staying up in Littleton, and putting focused effort in up there, as opposed to really splitting my time and trying to spin too many plates.
Well, and I feel like that's something that's not touched on quite enough when an owner is trying to run 2 shops, is really, if you don't have that unicorn that some people find with somebody who you can really trust and count on to manage a shop for you, who's almost as invested as you are.
Exactly.
You can't really expect that about the average person to love your shop the way you do.
Exactly.
But if you don't have that second person to count on, you really do have to split your focus, and that kind of damages both shops, because you don't have that passion fully being poured into one to make it the success that it needs to be.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was really fortunate timing wise, with losing the guys in New London. I was lucky to have, Ryan up in Littleton. He is, just about the most conscientious barber I've ever worked with. He comes in, he kills it, does great haircuts, takes care of his customers, and he was definitely, trains. he's worked at American, or had worked at American for so long and trained so many new barbers that, you know, I could toss him a couple. At the time they were my newbies. Now I guess they've been with me year and a half, 2 years almost. But you know, I could just say, here's a newbie, I'm leaving, I'm going down to New London. He's like, okay, and just takes care of it. And you know, I'm really fortunate that he's come on with me, and I'm glad he came up to the North Country. And you know, he similarly loves it up there. Like I said, his family's got a cabin, so he's always recreated up in the North Country. So now he's living up there, and we've got one of my other guys. He's moving up there next month full time. So we're all going to be Main Street or Main Street adjacent right in town, which I think it's going to be really good for us going forward to be, you know, focused in on Main Street down there.
Well, and I feel like that's one of the almost requirements in order to be successful as a multi-chair shop north of Concord, really, is that your barbers really do have to become part of the community you're serving. Like, yeah, you can live in Concord and commute to Nashua if you feel like it, you know, and rock your barbering job and not have a problem, because, you know, things are so populated that the expectation of knowing somebody from something other than cutting your hair is pretty low. So it's kind of like a moot point. But when you get into tighter knit communities, when you go further north, like, they want to know that you're invested in the community by more than just like making money there, because they want you to spend money there,
right? So
that you kind of continue the ecosystem economy wise in the community, because that's how they survive.
Yeah,
that's how Laconia survives. If it wasn't for people that, you know, came out of town, the way we get through winters is downtown merchants frequent downtown merchants.
Yeah. I mean, the good old. I mean, Laconia is very similar, I'm sure, to Littleton. You know, we joke that, you know, as spring is coming about and the vacationers are coming up, you know, we basically have a going away party for all the locals, that we're like, all right, we're all going to go work our retail jobs and our customer service jobs. See you later. Have a great summer. We'll see you in the fall. You in November. Have our reunion sometime, sitting around at the bar. Oh, hey, how was your summer? Was it good? Yeah. So, yeah, no, that definitely is how it feels. We feel really fortunate that we've been kind of adopted pretty easily by the Littleton community. And there's a lot of, you know, I being one, I guess, I have a skewed view, but I think there's a lot of really good transplants, I call us, up in Littleton that have, you know, moved there for the same reasons that I said, you know, that I loved it, that they've kind of, you know, we didn't discover anything, but, you know, for ourselves have found the town and been like, wow, I can jump in and like be a part of this community and help out and find a niche on Main Street, or find some way to make a living up there. And there's a really inspiring group of young business owners and young Main Street, you know, folk, I guess, up there that have really pushed what's going on. You know, it's a small town still. It's not, you know, Portsmouth, where there's 10 good coffee shops and 5 breweries and this and that. But we've got, you know, downtown Littleton, we got one killer brewery, more in the region. But we got one killer brewery, Schilling, right there. We've got, you know, killer coffee shop. We've got, you know, great antique stores, a couple little boutiques. And the thing that I tell people is it's really motivating up there, because yes, you want cool stuff in your little New Hampshire town, but right now, here's an example. There's a crew of like 5 guys or 5 folks that want a skate park really bad. And so there's been plenty of people that have sat around and said, oh, we should have a skate park, a bunch of times. And it took, you know, three or 4 or 5 people getting together going, hey, why don't we just do it? And there's a really, like, because there's space up there, things are relatively inexpensive up there, and there's a good, like, supportive kind of community of trying to make Main Street cool and make the area cool, that they're like, all right, well, let's just sit back, pick a spot, find a place, get some funding, cool. And they're actually in Bethlehem, so, you know, 10 minutes away, but they're working on setting up a skate park and getting some people coming in and really building a park. So I kind of say, like, it's inspiring up there, because if you got a cool idea and you think, oh, some culture, something should be happening up there, you can get 4 or 5 friends and pretty much just go do it yourself.
Is the town on board with a lot of the, like, really, really supportive with the
Absolutely.
innovation?
Yeah, the town manager up there, he's game to green light and support pretty much anything that we come up with, or anybody's bringing to the table. They're really trying to keep the shine. There's been newspaper articles here and there, and a couple of magazine articles saying, "Oh, Littleton's getting younger," and it truly is. Young people are moving up there and doing some interesting things, and so they're trying to really pay attention to that and say, "Hey, let's support these people that are coming in and trying to do something." We're not trying to. There's, at least as we speak right now, there's nobody knocking down cool old houses to build condos. There's nobody doing, there's obviously people moving into the area, which is neat, but for the most part, the crew that we've seen is, young people that are jumping into the community and want that small town feel still.
Yeah, respectful of the culture around them, and not wanting to, like, change it into wherever they came from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not, it doesn't feel like, people are trying to morph it into something, though. For me, I don't feel like a total I'm not coming from the other side of the country. I'm coming from Claremont. So the bones of Claremont and the bones of Littleton feel very similar. It's old brick buildings on Main Street and some old mills and some, so.
Like many places in New Hampshire.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't feel totally foreign to me, the look and feel of the downtown.
Well, and, as long as there's 603 in your blood, it's like there's, with the exception of the Seacoast, which seems to have its own little bubble, there seems to be a general acceptance going, all right, you're from here? Cool.
Yeah.
You may not be from the area or the county, but you're from here, so you understand in generally what New Hampshire wants.
Well, I benefit from the fact that there's people that have moved up from Massachusetts, New York, and even further and beyond, that they get called a flatlander, because I've been told by some diehard north of the Notch folks that Claremont would be a flatlander if it weren't for all those other people that have come up. So
As somebody who's from Ohio, which is the flattest of the flat,
yeah.
I question anybody calling anybody a flatlander.
Yeah, that's real flat. Yeah, no, I definitely, overall dig it. Been enjoying being up there.
Nice. And I feel like it's really one thing that doesn't get talked about, whether it's in barber school, whether you're talking to a shop owner where you're trying to open your own shop or anything, is really dealing with a municipality when you want to open a shop from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
It's a unique thing that if you've never dealt with the city before, you never opened a business before, anything like that, unless that particular town or city has a map or a framework worked out for people to streamline the situation, it can be like walking around in the dark hoping you're pressing the right buttons on the wall.
Yeah.
How was your experience in New London versus Littleton? Because you basically went to a strip mall where there was a barbershop at once. So I imagine you have to worry about, like, change of use, because it was a barbershop. Not necessarily having to deal with a permit to hang a barber pole, depending on what municipality you're in.
So flip side, actually. In New London, I was putting a barbershop in a space that had been a barbershop for 40 some odd years since the building was built. So the guy, Crescenti was his name, the guy that built the strip mall. Lenny was his barber. And so he cut out this little 250 square feet just for Lenny when he built the building to put him in there. And so this was purpose built to be Lenny's barbershop. And when I moved into town, I was like, hey, I want to open up. I went to the town. What do I got to do? And sure enough, I had to fill out a change of use, which took, probably a couple weeks to get everything set up. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I figured I'd have to do that, but I was waiting on this, and then I had to get sign permits and everything set up. So that took a while. And then I was working with I think they've sold the plaza at this point, but it was, the big holding company down in Mass. They had to sign my paperwork to get over to the town to put a sign on the building, which took, I think it was 6 months. I didn't have a sign on the building because I was chasing down this company, which, well, I'll fess up to it. They wouldn't sign my paperwork, so finally they wouldn't return my phone calls. I couldn't get a hold of them, And so I just stopped paying rent for a while, and suddenly they found my phone number.
Weird.
I said, "Oh yeah, I have all that rent right here for you. Would you mind signing that sign permit for me? That'd be great." And so they did. They signed it and sent it back over to me, and we squared everything up. But yeah, it took some chasing to get everything set up on my first go. Which was a good learning curve of, dealing with registering a trade name, all those sorts of things that, I'm fortunate that, I had guidance from friends that had open shop and be able to talk to them about their experience. But in New Hampshire, pretty much every town is its own animal. And so that was what I was coming off of. And I was now, headed up to Littleton. And I'm prepared. I know what I'm doing. I've been a business owner for 2.5, 3 years at that point. So I was like, all right, we're going to go in, we're going to figure it all out. And so I went in. The guy that owned the building when I first moved in has now sold it to somebody else, but he'd owned the building in his family. So it was like two, 3 generations. This building's been in his family. He kind of owned it as a hobby, basically, and was selling it, working on selling it. So he wasn't all that concerned. So, when I first moved in there, I worked with the guy that was moving out of the space more than I worked with the landlord, because he didn't care. He's like, "You guys figure it out.
Not my problem.
I want somebody in there. You guys figure it out." And I was like, "All right, it works for me." So I had the number of the guy that was moving out. We coordinated dates, and I was antsy to get in there. So he was moving a vintage clothing store out of the space, and I went up and I was like, "You need help moving boxes? I could get you out." So I was moving them out of the shop just so I could get to the floors a little faster.
We're both motivated. Let's go.
And so, I was helping him in there. And then finally I got my keys to the space. I was excited to get work done. And I had talked with the landlord a little bit. I was like, we got to put a sink in. We got to, put floors down. I'm going to paint. I'm thinking I'll swap some lights out, things like that. And I was like, "Do you want to pull permits? Do we need to do any of that?" And he was like, "What do you need to pull permits for?" And I was like, I don't know. I kind of thought that and he's like, no, not up here. You're fine. I was like, okay. So I went to the town. I was like, "Hey, I'm opening a shop. I want to, do I need to do a change of use and this, I want to put a sign on the building and hang it out and whatever." And they're like, "No, you're good. Go ahead." And I was like, "So that's it? Really? I just come in here?" Yeah, that's how to open a business in the North Country. Put a sign on the building and start accepting money for services and goods. That's it. It's pretty easy. So I was a little dumbfounded and in a little bit of disbelief after, my first experience being the occasional hoop that I had to jump through. This one was like, "What are you talking to me for? Go open your business. What are you?" I was like, "Oh,
I get the impression they don't have a school to pay for up there or anything."
They do. But yeah, no, it was a really funny kind of experience of like, all right, well, I guess I'll get to it then. Thanks, everybody. And yeah, so that was a fun experience, and also, building it. I've always been somebody who likes building things, likes making things and designing. So having a fresh, clean slate and figuring out what I wanted the shop to look like this go around. Anybody that's seen both of my shops, definitely you can see a total difference between look and feel. And mostly it was just kind of a creative challenge for me to go. It's kind of a funny space, and what sort of environment do I want in there, and how am I going to work with it? So I did the same thing. I built from scratch all my barber stations and mirror frames and counters and all that, did everything myself, which, I look back on, and anybody that really knew what they were doing probably could have done what I did in a week and a half, but it took me 3 months to be cutting hair and also going through and building everything and figuring out, okay, so I've drawn this in a notebook. How am I going to make a goofy, weird, boxed mirror frame that's going to go up out of a piece of plywood that I've decided to chop into bits?
And I feel like that's a balance of, what are you wanting to pay for it? Do you want to pay in money or do you want to pay in time?
Yeah.
And sometimes, creating, as people in our profession often do. We just have that desire to create.
Yeah.
A lot of the artwork in my shop is done by me because every once in a while I get the urge to create. And it's generally the similar motif to what the shop is. So it works out, especially if I can make one thing perform two functions.
Yeah.
It's my favorite.
I fully agree with that. I have a tiny apartment at the moment, and everything is multi-purpose for sure. Is it a footstool or is it storage?
Yeah. Even down to the products that I make, it's like, I found out that I can do two things with these things. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think it's cool that, you found a way to combine a couple of different interests and different passions. I mean, that's definitely, like my new London shop, I love antiquing. Love it. And especially, I'm not necessarily saying digging through antique stores. I'm a dumpster diving antiquer through and through. I'll hunt for whatever I want, flea markets and whatnot. That's my game. And so the new London shop, we had so much space. We went to 1,500 square feet with like 2 rooms, and it was an excessive amount of space. Throw that in lessons learned as well. But it was an excessive amount of space that it was kind of like, well, what am I going to do with all this room? And so it kind of just became my playroom in some ways, which it was always funny to see, regular customers that were every 2-3 weeks, something like that. They'd always see, they walk into the other side. And yeah, we had the bar where people were hanging out, but we also might have, some building project that I was working on over in the corner, and they're like, what the hell is he doing now? I'm like, I don't know, man. I just grabbed some cool stuff from an antique shop, and now I'm tearing it apart. There was actually the chairs that were in the Littleton shop. We've swapped them for my 40s Paydards now. But the chairs that were in the Littleton shop, they were some 60s Koken Paydards that I needed to mess with. So in the corner of the shop, everybody was watching the process of tear the chairs apart and put them back together and get them powder coated and all that
Sounds
stuff.
like going to the barber school.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, I've been compared to Dave a time or two where it's like, what's the broken stuff in the corner? Oh, it's awesome. You wait, I'm going to fix it up. It's going to be great.
5 years later.
All too real. But yeah, no, the combo of interests, and that's actually, I don't know, to mildly segue. So, when we shut down for I think a grand total of 3 months. It was maybe 6 or 7 days shy of 3 months during quarantine that I kind of had to figure out something to do in the meantime that was distant, but it still made $1 or $2. And so I had all my antiques and cool finds that I had sitting around in the new London shop that I'd moved up to Littleton, and I was fortunate that I had found a workshop space other than my apartment in Littleton to store my spare 7 barber chairs, for sale by the way, that I need that need work, and antiques and all sorts of odds and ends that I've grabbed over the years, and so I had this mountain of stuff. So I decided early on in quarantine, all right, let's try and get through some of this pile. So I started selling some of the stuff that I had sitting around that was kind of neat. And then, like any mildly entrepreneurial spirit, I was like, "Ooh, this is going pretty good." So I started digging up things I was finding out for sale for cheap, and maybe flipping them for a few dollars more, and grabbing some stuff on Facebook Marketplace and flipping things in that regard to make a few dollars during quarantine. And it ended up being kind of fun. So I've been working with a friend of mine up in Burlington, and now we've been flipping antiques as well as cutting hair. She doesn't cut hair, but flipping antiques on the side as a little side project. But it was kind of born from my affinity for collection down in the new London shop.
Well,
just
I
with
feel
the
like
space.
that's part of keeping your sanity through 2020 is like when you can't do what you normally do, you find a way to make sure that will still survive.
We had the most secure profession in the world until.
We're not pandemic proof, but we are recession proof.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're already good for like the coming
Yeah.
few years.
Exactly. We'll be all right. We might have to lower our prices down to 2 bits again, but other than that,
I don't know
no, I
about
don't
that.
think
It's
so.
like everybody raised their prices when we had to pay for so much PPE.
Ugh, I know.
I was like, I can't do that to people.
Yeah.
Like, just stay where it is and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
We'll work it out. But of course, yeah, I mean, I feel like through 2020, we've really been very fortunate to see our customer bases really show their appreciation for us. Whether it was because they decided to get desperate during lockdown and make a mistake, or to grow it out for a couple of months and then be happy to come see us when we were open again. But definitely support from community. People are more happy to tip and to bring us back because they know that we're still not making what we usually would make because of the restrictions we have.
Yeah, we've definitely spaced out our appointments, and so when we first reopened, just stretching to an hour appointment slots as opposed to 45 minutes, every 3 haircuts we're losing one, or every 4 haircuts we're losing one at that point. So that adds up. That adds up quick.
It does.
It's so
we don't want to get into that math again, but
no. Fortunately, I can't do that in my head, and I'm not going to bust out the calculator. So we'll say it's a bunch. We'll go with a hearty bunch.
I flash it back to when we were going through Dave's class
Dave math.
of Math 101 when it comes to barbers making money.
Yeah. No. If you put the aftershave on while you're standing on the left-hand side of the chair, you can save 5 minutes, which means that over the course of the 20
you're talking
years, then
time
you're
math
save,
with Dave.
Oh, my
That's
goodness.
a different level.
I love it.
I'm talking like barber school, not like American Barber. That's different Dave. Different Dave. School Dave. When it's like, all right, you can actually make money in this profession. If you charge $20 a haircut, you can do, so many haircuts in an hour, and you can do so many hours in a day, and all that stuff. But they still don't get the whole taxes thing. You go, that sounds great in gross.
Right.
But
we need to use the word gross a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, and especially if you've only ever had a W-2.
Yeah.
It's going to doing your own taxes or hiring an accountant and trying to wrap your brain around the fact that the tax law changes every year.
Yeah. Yep. It's a different animal.
Which kind of brings up a question that I was curious about because, we've had a few business owners here so far, and everybody kind of runs their stuff differently. So I kind of want to touch on how you've decided to run your shop and your barbers from a financial standpoint, because the way that I do it is straight up booth rent, flat rate. I don't know what they make. It's not my problem. It makes my taxes as easy as humanly possible because that is what I care about. I go, I didn't open a shop to get rich. It's not going to happen. So the way that that's affected my 2020 is really everybody's had to boil it down to their priority.
Right.
And my priority is for the shop to stay open.
Right.
So that gives them their freedom with their schedule.
Yeah.
I don't care if you take 2-3 days off a week. That's up to you. You want to do whatever's better for your mental health, you do that. But I get my rent and the shop stays open. Because floating that sucker for 2.5 months, not fun.
Yeah.
Don't want to do it again.
Yeah, we so when I first opened, obviously it was just me, but then as I brought on guys, I basically just copy pasted from Dave where it was, commission based and it was a flat commission. And he did, and I did the same thing. Newbies started at a lower commission rate and worked their way up to a higher commission rate. And I don't know how he's doing it now, but that's how it was when I was there.
Well, that's pretty standard throughout I'd say the region.
Yeah.
It's all right, you're straight out of school, 65%, and then we build you up, the more your skill develops.
Yeah. And then I don't know, I think it was probably the 2.5, 3 year mark, maybe somewhere around there. I started to have dreams and designs of a second shop, and we were up to 5 guys. And for me personally, having worked in a tax office now, I say that, but I was a secretary. I baked cookies and answered the phones, but I listened. I listened a lot. There was a guy that had run a very successful large business that was doing taxes as a retirement job, and I used to sit there and just pick his brain constantly. So I learned a fair amount from him, and one of the biggest things, in my opinion, and I don't know everybody's situation, but in my opinion, when you look at the letter of the law, are they an employee or are they an independent contractor? in my shop, my barbers wear a Topstone shirt. They got my Dickies on, and then they come in. I don't completely set their schedule necessarily. I'm pretty free and open. But especially when it was 7 guys on 5 chairs, I needed to make a schedule and say, hey, this is when you can cut. This is when you can cut. This is how many chairs we've got. We got to make do. So I was fully scheduling them what days they couldn't work, and looking at training and how we were approaching haircuts and where the client base was coming from. They were booking their haircuts on my website, or the shops, but it was through me. So I couldn't say that Danny was a independent guy if the guy that was coming in because he went on my website and booked, and then Danny's wearing the shirt that I gave him and working the hours that I told him to work. Is he an independent contractor? No.
It's certainly not when it comes to the hours or the requirement of a uniform or
Right.
The setting of anything like that, or telling them how to do something.
Yeah, and so I sat back and not that I've ever really micromanaged the day-to-day or the total experience in the chair or how they cut the hair. I've always been a strong believer that everybody kind of has their own style and their own way, and but I knew that I wanted to open a second shop at that time. I knew that I had a bunch of barbers, and the last thing I wanted, because I wanted to do this for a long time, was to ever be 10 years, 15, 20 years into this career and maybe at the time the big dreams were, oh no, what if I have 20 guys working for me and suddenly the Department of Revenue or whatever, the New Hampshire Employment Office comes to my door and says, hey, you owe us 15 years of back unemployment tax. And I was like, I don't ever want that.
Or we decide to become like California and eliminate an option that's been used by our profession for a long time.
Right. Yeah, and I do fully agree that there are plenty of shops that run as independent contractors that are independent contractors, especially in a booth rent situation. But for me, it was very clear when I sat down and looked at it that I was going to have to really stretch some of the verbiage to say my guys were independent contractors, and I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So we switched everybody to employees, and then it meant, and not to get too into the weeds, but it meant the business was now paying Social Security and unemployment. We were collecting, and we were paying a payroll company. And so basically it worked out to be like a 13-14% difference. So I knocked everybody's commission down 10%. So I ate a portion of that by switching, but I knew that would be the case. But it really, I don't know, we've been doing it a while now, and it's I think simplified things. It took a little getting used to at first, but it simplified things for everybody in the shop to kind of go, okay, I come into work, I cut hair all week long, I get to, I keep my tips, take them home with me, but other than that, bam, there's my paycheck at the end of the week. And also, everybody, I think, especially starting out, struggles with budgeting. It's tough. I can remember when I first started at American, man, you get that really good Saturday, and you walk out the door with, what do I got? Man, I made $300 today, and then you get home and you're like, man, I made $300 today. That looks like 180. What did I do?
And that is why I have people pay their rent on Saturday.
There you go.
Because I know they made it that day.
Yeah. So, I think I think there's, a bunch of different ways to do it, but, the way we've done it has worked pretty well for us. And I think, I definitely check in every now and then and make sure everybody's like, hey, is this still working? Is this still, because I don't want that to be a friction point by any means.
For sure. And it definitely opens up a lot of opportunities for you when it comes to, offering raises, possibility of benefits and all that kind of stuff that comes along with being an employee. And it takes so much stress off of your individual barbers.
Yeah, they don't have to carry their own individual liability insurance. It's all covered by the umbrella. It also, you were saying tax reasons, but for me, before switching to employees, everybody that worked at the shop was income, which is what they are for you. Mm-hmm. Now everybody that works at the shop is an expense for me. So as far as bookkeeping goes, it makes way more sense to see, okay, this is the gross revenue coming into the shop. This is the amount of payroll that goes out the door. and everything that's left over after everything else.
Right,
becomes,
better write-offs and
yeah.
all of that.
So, it just cleans it up, because in most other businesses, people working in the business are an expense and not income.
Yep.
It cleaned up a lot of that kind of stuff for me. But it definitely setting up took more work.
I'm sure. Especially when you started off doing one way and then switched to another. It's like, but we've always done it this way.
I know, it was a little befuddling to start, for sure, but it makes sense now.
Well, and I think it's a really important conversation to have for people that haven't had, that topic brought up, especially if they're new to their profession, the various different ways that you can work as a barber financially, because we're just focused on cutting hair and, finding a chair, and it's like, okay, cool, I want to work.
Well, I've had a big grant. So, we've run by appointment. I started out walk-in only, cash only, just me, and that lasted about, I opened in September, and then it was by Thanksgiving week of being open, or the week before, by myself, that I had every single waiting chair, plus my spare barber chair, plus people sitting on the windowsill, and like multiple people standing outside, and people asking me. I'm a new barber, so I'm taking 45 to an hour on every haircut, which now I do that because I want to take my time. But at the time, that was about as fast as I could possibly go.
That was the hustle.
That was the afterburners were on, and somebody peeks their head in the door. I'm talking 11 people in the room, they peek their head in the door. How long is it going to be? I'm like, 4 hours? I don't know. It's just me. You say 4 hours, 3 people are like, really? I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just starting out. I haven't even eaten my sandwich yet. But, and that was when I first decided to say, okay, I got to do something different, because, I'm losing people walking out the door that, if they'd come in a half hour earlier and this guy come in a half hour later, nobody would have been waiting. And so I started brainstorming. Obviously it didn't take much to come up with the idea of appointments, because I didn't come up with it. It's been around. But I started looking at ways that I was going to implement appointments. And when I first started, I got a phone and a notebook with a piece of paper, just to figure out okay, people call in, write their name down, put a time, cool. And then I wanted to streamline and find an easier way. So that was when I started poking around at different online scheduling options, and eventually landed on Reserva, which I've been with Reserva now 4 years plus. Those guys have been awesome with me. I don't know if you've ever spoken with them or who you use, but
I'm a Square girl.
Yeah. Well, Reserva's been fantastic. When I first started out, they were super simple. It was a pretty basic scheduling system. You couldn't do a lot of things. Now they've added a ton of features. But the biggest thing that I kind of say is, like, James from Reserva is like one of the realest guys, and I'll pick that over any company that I've talked to. He's such a down-to-earth, real guy. I really feel like the changes they've made over the last 4 years are, I'm not saying because of me, but because, I've made suggestions, and he's, I know they've been echoes of things he's heard from other people, but they've taken those suggestions to heart and implemented them. And the thing I always say is they were a scheduling system built for barbershops, and I am their customer 100%. Square, they have a very streamlined service, and I've seen it and considered it before, but I'm not Square's customer. Square's customer is everybody, and
right.
We use them for our point of sale, but Square's customer is everybody. They want all of them. But for James at Reserva, barbershops that need appointments, that's his customer, end of story. That's who they're looking for. And so, even very start of pandemic, this is like customer service to the max. Very start of the pandemic, a lot of shops were starting to close down. We had just made the decision to close down. He called me just to check in, and he's like, "You doing all right? Is that check in on mental health, make sure like I was doing okay, and like asking if there's any way that he could help." And I won't name names, but there was another scheduling service that called me that morning before I heard from James, to give me a sales pitch of switching to their appointment company. And I'd already talked to him and told him I was good. I'm sticking with these guys. But they called me and said, hey, we want you to reconsider, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I appreciate that, but I'm going to stick with Reserva. And they were like, well, you do run a business, right? You like making money? And I was like, oh, we're done here.
Oh, it's like getting called by Yelp.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, we're so done here. And I was so glad I heard from James that day. I told him that story. I was like, dude, this is real customer service. Not even customer service. This is just being a real person. And there's a tangent about that. Sorry, but yeah.
Well, and somebody who's naturally very introverted,
Yeah.
If there's a way I can do something online and not talk to a person, I'm all for it personally.
Oh.
Coming from my perspective.
Yeah,
so,
I'm the reverse of that.
which is great that we have so many options for it. Like I do have, product reps that I do keep in contact with. We don't talk on the phone, which I love.
Yeah.
We'll either text or email, and I really like having a rapport that way. But that's one thing I've been doing Square for probably, I've had their point of sale for like 8 years.
Yeah.
But their appointments I've had for probably 5,
Yeah.
maybe 6. Because I started doing appointments like before hours, before the shop ever even thought of it.
Yeah. It is. With the new regulations and things, I've been a pusher for appointment-based shops for a while. I've had a lot like.
Yeah, it's been great if you're already there.
Yeah, I know. I was like, nothing changed. These shops that I kind of feel for them that they've had to quickly figure out, how they're gonna run appointments and what way. They really had to grab that and figure it out real quick, as opposed to being able to take their time and figure out a system that worked well for them.
Well, that's one of the great things about our network in New Hampshire, though, is that like we know so many people between having graduated NASOB and just. If you're a barber with a passion here, you have gone and talked to a bunch of different barbers and people all over the state, really being able to reach out to them during this situation and be like, hey, what do you use? Why do you use it? Like pros and cons, trying to figure this out is great that we have such an open network.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely.
What other profession can say that when so many people are focused on like competition and, it's a versus situation. We're just like, there's plenty of heads to cut for everybody.
Yeah.
I got no problem like telling you how I do things.
Yeah, definitely. And we're fortunate being, relatively small town. Still multi-chair shops, but small town. The thing, like I had a guy that he worked with us 3-4 months up in Littleton, and he'd done the same thing that I did. He came on. He said, "Hey, I want to open my own shop at some point," and he was driving an hour to come work with us. I was like, "Yeah, cool." Pandemic hit. There was spaces that were coming available, and he got a steal of a deal about 25 minutes from us in St. Jay. And he called me in the midst of everything, and he was like, listen, man, he's like, I don't want to do this to you right now. I'm so sorry, but I found this. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. I was like, for one, I just shut down a shop, and you need some waiting chairs? I got all sorts of stuff. So I called him up. I was like, come on down. And we hooked him up with all sorts. I just went and got a haircut from him the other day, and he was like, oh, man. He's like, thank you so much. I appreciate, I was really hoping you wouldn't be mad at me. And like, we touched on it earlier, but if there's anything we can say, we learned from Dave is, you don't own anybody. Everybody, if they work with you, it's at will. They work with you while they work with you, and you ought to just support them if they want to go and do something else. Obviously, like he was never nasty or bad about it. He told me right out the gate that he wanted to do his own thing, so I knew. I knew the second he called me. He's like, hey, man, I got to talk to you. I was like, ooh, I know what this conversation sounds like. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Go for it. Let me know if you need help. And that's more is more, in my opinion.
Well, and so much of that is having open communication. Like, it's part of that just maturity of becoming an older adult is like learning that communication is important. It doesn't matter what your relationship status is with another person. It's having that mutual respect and going, hey, being upfront, this is my goal, this is what I want to do. That way you don't feel blindsided because you have an expectation, and then suddenly I'm like, oops, sorry, I can't reach that expectation. I'm going to go do my own thing. Yeah. And that, for some people, takes years. For some people, they're lucky enough to grow up in a family that, teaches you that.
Yeah. I know. He said to me, he's, in St. Jay, he's like, I don't know how, I'd love to maybe be able to hire or something someday. He's like, but there's no barbers up here. I'm like, well, I opened up in New London. and there was no barbers in New London. And New London's on the older end of the New Hampshire spectrum. It's, a lot of middle-aged kind of families, basically, or, it's a retirement community kind of where a lot of people have gone back. And, I think the average age of the town is in the 50s. And so trying to find cool, hip 20-year-olds that want to come chill in New London, it was a tough sell. But the thing that I'm really proud of that I did while I was there was I had people come to me and say, hey, I want to be a barber. And so out of that community, I went to career days and I talked to customers coming into the shop or friends of friends, community members, whatever. But let's see, four barbers were created out of that town by coming to my shop or having some experience with me and my shop and my passion for it, that they became barbers and went to the barber school after having taken part in my shop, where it became crazy to think that a town went from one guy for 43 years to 7 barbers and 5 chairs, nuts. So that was the thing I was saying to Dan up in St. Jay. He's like, there's no barbers up here. I was like, not yet. But they're going to see you, and they're going to see the thing that you're passionate about. And he poured his heart and soul in that shop. It looks beautiful. It's awesome. I was like, they're going to see this shop, and there's going to be one at least inside of the first 3 years that says to you, hey, I'm thinking about being a barber. And I think you talked about it with Corey, and I was listening to that. But just the huge expansion of how many barbers there are in the state of New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy. And I think it really is, I don't know, it's spreading, I guess.
Passion's contagious. I mean, we experienced that firsthand in barber school. Dave has enough passion for the entire population of the state.
Yeah.
But, and you just feed off of that when you're in school. And then when you go off on your own, it just perpetuates because you've caught your own fire. And people see that, and you gravitate towards that. Anybody with a passion for anything, you're like, all right, it's not necessarily anything about this person, the way that they operate, but because they have a passion for this, I believe them, because you know where that energy and that focus is being put. And, I wouldn't have 5 barbers here if it wasn't for, one of them specifically started off as a customer. I just told him because he had a GI Bill. I went to barber school that way, and eventually, after working at, I think, 3 other shops, he made his way, and boom, he started working here. Yeah,
it is. It's a really cool. Logan that works in the Littleton shop with me now. He was a sophomore in high school. It was his first time into the shop, and apparently he dug it because he went and wrote a 5-star Facebook review. And first time into the shop, and at the bottom of the Facebook review, he said, kind of makes me want to be a barber myself one day. And sure enough, he started barber school a week and a half after he graduated, and now he's worked at the shop almost 2 years. So that's one that I'm like, that's really cool.
That's one of those rare, great occurrences, is being able to get somebody that knows what they want to do so early in life, in high school, straight out of high school. Tyler was like that. He went from high school to barber school to helping me rip up the floor of the first shop, and he's been here ever since. Yeah. Gina also, she did a cosmetology program, did so well with that at Pinkerton that she got a scholarship to help her pay for housing at barber school. Yeah. And then, she went straight from barber school to working here. And, they're a rare breed of people that I'm just
I know. I wish I knew what I wanted to do when I was 18. I did everything instead, but that served me well. Jack of all trades sort of thing.
Well, and very self-sufficient.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I joked, with you said about the we're recession proof. I'm like, I've been training for the Depression for a while, so here we go. I can take an old coffee tin and turn it into a serving tray if you need me to. I'm ready to go. But yeah, it's I'm definitely grateful for the folks that really know what they want to do and want to dive into it. They feed me wanting to do it more. And I'm lucky. You talked about with the art that you've put in upstairs, and I'm sure you've found other avenues. But I consider myself somewhat of a creative type, and so The shop has been a really cool outlet for me as far as, other stuff I want to do, So we've created different t-shirts, different logo designs, and hats and apparel and whatnot that we've, just gotten bored and been like, yeah, sure, we have a logo. I like my logo. It's cool. But we want to do a hat. And do we just want to slap our logo on a hat? Nah, let's make one that looks like, a 50s gas station. Why? I don't know, because we can, And so we've done stuff like that. I guess notably we did like a series of tiny desk style. We called them the Last Cut. We had bands that were playing in the area that were from as far away as like Montreal down to Brooklyn, they were touring through, and we worked with a couple of music venues in the area to say, hey, can we maybe get that band to come into the shop? And we recorded like a concert series in the shop for a while because I love music. So, we kind of dove on that, and like I said, antiques and selling some vintage and stuff out of the shop. That's kind of been a passion of mine as well. So it's been the, I don't know, the utensil to write with, I guess, that it's like I'm interested in this thing. How can I make it tie into the shop and come together in that way?
Well, and it's so funny because I joke to people a lot that, I know enough about barbering that I can compare the world to barbering. And, if you have the perspective of everything is connected, once you know enough about one thing, you can connect it in principle to everything else. And that goes to exactly what you're saying, whether it's, a general philosophy or principle that you're talking that transcends whatever you're talking about in life to something practical and going, all right, well, we want to create this. How do we tie it into this? And that's just really part of the creative mind, I think, is finding those connections. It's playing connect the dots with ideas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I dig it so much. It's because it's, I don't know, it's like baking a cake or something like that, like everybody's got their own way of doing it. And it's cool to see, especially, I don't know, our worldview is Dave's school. It's NESOB here. That like, we know a lot of the people that came out of that school, so we pay attention and we can see everybody's shops, throughout the state, whether it, Wilfred's or Rick's or yours or, seeing these shops and like, what do they do with it? Because basically, at the beginning, we need mirrors, we need chairs, we need we used to need waiting chairs. I don't know anymore, but basically it was mirrors, barber chairs, waiting chairs. Then you've got yourself a barber shop. But to that point, you can do as much or as little as you want with it. You can make that place absolutely crazy. And seeing some of the shops, man, they got 3 pool tables and a graffiti wall and this and that. Or your shop, super classic, super crisp and old school looking. Like, I'm jealous of those tin ceilings. So someday I'll have tin ceilings. But seeing what people do with a form. The form is those 3 things. That's all you need, really, for a barbershop. You can have a cash register if you want to, but other than that, your pockets work just fine. So
right, you got a regular drawer in a cabinet, you're fine.
Yeah, so you need those 3 things, and other than that, figure it out. And so I love that about barbershops and the style that everybody brings to it. It's really cool.
Well, and going down back to like our basic, what we do as a profession, you have to first be able to visualize. Mm-hmm. And that is constant, whether you're just, when you're a barber in somebody else's shop, you can visualize how you're going to set up your station and where things need to be there, mm-hmm. to being able to walk into a space that is something completely different and be able to visualize where your stations will go, where the sink's going to go, where you can build out a bathroom, all of those things. Like, that is such an essential skill no matter where you are in our profession.
Yeah. I know. For me, I've accidentally, like, now Littleton was the 3rd shop of, building from scratch, I guess. And so it almost became a tradition now. I don't plan on building another barbershop anytime I'm tired, but maybe. I'm sure it'll happen at some point. I'll get fussy and decide to go build another one somewhere or do something, move or whatever. But it's become almost a tradition. I have this old, they were just throwing it away when I was in the Guard, which is
Sounds like the military to me.
Yeah, it's a real problem for me. But I've got an old Vietnam era field table and these like 1960s like military olive drab office chairs that they squeak. They squeak like you wouldn't believe.
I know exactly the chairs you're talking about.
You sit in that thing, they're deafening. I love them.
And they're heavy.
They're so heavy, but every time I've built, and now, you know, with selling vintage, I've got a retail, well, my workshop is being converted to a retail space. And step one, set up the field table, set up my chair, plop a notebook down, and oftentimes a 30-pack of Bud Light, Dave. You know, plop down and just doodle on paper for a while. Where would I put this? What if I put this here, move around, whatever? And like that process has been one of the things I've enjoyed most is, like you said, visualizing, just sitting down with those few things and going, okay, we'll figure it out. We've got a room, now what? And that's cool. Feels like the start, you know?
Well, for me, I've always prided myself on the ability to play Legos with like moving people and, you know, being able to visualize, all right, so how are we going to fit these shaped things inside this particular container? And I'm usually really, really good at that, you know, measure an eyeball. So when I actually first looked at this space, it looked nothing like it does now.
Really?
Oh, there was a fuse box. That's how not updated it is. Everything is new. You look above us, since we're in the basement, you see that the electrical's new, the plumbing's new, like it's all new. Anything old probably isn't hooked up. But being able to walk in here, because it was a storage room for a retail space for a long time.
Oh.
Like in order to install internet and phone, they had to go through the hole that they made for the ductless air system because nothing had ever been installed.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So being able to walk in here and ignore all of the other crap and just look at the measurements for what it was and go, I can put 5 stations on that wall. I can put a bathroom here. I can have my own space here. I can have 2 shampoo sinks and know where things are going to go just by walking into the space. Is like, I can make this happen. And those are the kind of things in my barbering career, which you described as serendipitous, that have just flowed.
Yeah.
Anytime it's been barbering related and it just immediately flows and I can see it, there's no hesitation. It's just like, all right, this is what we're doing, because the universe is like, go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, no, it is nice, you know, once you've seen it and lived through it a few times, it becomes a little bit easier and a little bit, it becomes a fun challenge. You know, the first go around, it was definitely, I had no idea. I mean, that shop, I think it was edit number 400 every time, because it was tear this out, move this, add this, build one of these, needed some shelves, needed more shelves. You know, I hadn't realized I worked with, I don't know if you know Mike Davis, big Welsh guy, but he was 6'3", I was 6'1", so the two of us were working in the shop. We had shelves all the way up, and then we brought Danny on with us, and he's 5'9" or 5'10" or something like that. We got him a step stool at first, but eventually we started hanging stuff a little lower. But it's one of those things, workflow worked for us, but then we had to figure some more stuff out. So
buy him some platform shoes.
Stilts maybe, I don't know. No. Yeah, we being able to figure out a space and how it needs to come together, like it's enjoyable for sure. But
well, and I don't know about you, but I can't do the old chairs anymore. I've had 7 years of old chairs. And
I'm still into them. I love them. I love them I mean, I told you about it. So my Paydar, I mean, I've been cutting on that thing from barber school till now.
You're mechanically inclined, right?
Yes, fairly.
I'm not, but I have small hands that can fit down into a cylinder of a barber chair, elbow deep in oil.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to have to do again. So
yeah.
I finally, thank you, pandemic, SBA loans, whatever.
Upgrade.
Yeah. I was like, all right, we're going to switch up the chairs. I mean, it was also because 2 of the chairs were not mine. Mm-hmm. They were one of our barbers, Harvard, his family's chairs.
Oh.
And it's like...
out of the shop.
Well, and he already knows that he's going in a different direction.
Yep.
He still wants to be a barber, but that's not going to be his full-time gig eventually. Yeah. He's going to school for coding now.
Oh, cool.
And so I didn't I didn't want to be responsible for somebody's chairs that are older than any of my chairs.
Yeah.
That have been in his family for 4 generations. I'm like, all right, I love that you were able to fix them up and to have them in here for the time being. They were being a headache for him with having to fix certain things. So
Yeah.
it's like, look, this can be a clean slate. Now we can all match. I had the chairs that I switched out with him in my room for like a year and a half. So I was like, I know that they're good. Once you get past the foot pedal situation, it's a solid chair that they make.
Foot pedals. Oof.
It took a while, but now when I go to a chair that has a hand pump, I'm like, oh, right, there's no foot thing. All right, slap.
I know. I love my old chairs so much, but every one of them's got its quirk, which I think I kind of love it because it's that old car that like, yeah, second gear's up here, but you got to kind of wiggle it a little bit before, and then it goes into gear. And you know just how your chair works. And it was, I collected them everywhere from like way up north in Vermont and all the way down into the Hudson Valley of New York buying chairs. And I had 5 matching Paydars in the New London shop, or matching-ish, similar vintage. A couple of them were slightly different colors, but still the same model. And it was funny because on the surface, anybody that doesn't necessarily know barber chairs, or even some barbers, you might look and say, hey, those are all the same chair. They must work all the same. No, every one of them's got their own quirk. This one sticks a little bit, so you got to kind of push the top of it to make it lean back. This one creaks. This one doesn't pump all the way up.
And no 2 brakes are the same.
No 2 brakes
Despite the fact that they're the same brand.
Yep.
Like, depending on the decade, totally different.
Yep.
I mean, they look the same, but they do not fit the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. To me, it's still a little fun. There's definitely... I now won't buy anything past like 1955 because those are a pain. Those are a pain to work on.
A lot more moving parts, a lot more like little things that can just break or get lost.
Anything
once ashtrays start being attached, it's like, all right.
Yeah. Pre-1940, those things are easy as pie. Anything you want to fix on them, you can buy at the hardware store or make yourself. But
yeah, and I mean, with the modern chairs, I'm glad that it took 20 years probably for the market to go, oh, gee, barbers, they don't like buying new chairs. They just find the really old ones. Maybe we should start making one that's similar quality.
Yeah, I know.
But they finally have, so I'm super happy about it.
Yeah, I'll have to dig in on what those are. I'm curious.
Especially since they weigh so much less.
Yeah, I've got a Hoyer lift just like Dave. I have. And I was talking about, I've got this workshop space. I've got my spare 7 chairs in there, which is great. I got to get rid of some because I have moved them so many times.
That's almost 2 tons worth of barber chairs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I moved them all the other day. I painted the floors in this workshop, and I had to move them all outside. And I actually had a guy, so I was rolling paint on the floor, or enamel on the floor, and a guy saw all the chairs outside. He poked his head in after I've dragged them all out there, and he's like, hey, you having a yard sale? I was like, no, not. I'm just working on, so I brought stuff outside. He's like, oh, I saw all your barber chairs out there. And like immediately I was like, well, are you interested in buying a barber chair? He's like, no, I was going to sell one. I was like, no, you picked the wrong moment, my friend. I just moved 7 barber chairs out the door. There is no chance I'm moving 8 back in. So
there is no falling in love with a barber chair today.
Catch me in a few months when I forget how heavy they are or something. But right now, I am not buying one more. Thank you. But yeah, so
yeah, for 7 years it was my annual trip to borrow Dave's Hoyer lift for our charity function that we do every year, and it was like that's why I bought a truck is so that I could move barber chairs, and it's like, you know what? I'm real tired of that. I'm cool with like moving barber chairs in my truck still, but I shouldn't have to borrow anything from Dave anymore.
I bought my own.
And then I was like, I'm also not buying my own because they're kind of expensive.
$40, Craigslist.
What?
Yeah. Good luck getting that deal ever again, but
right?
Yeah, I lucked out.
But yeah, so I was like, all right, you know what? These cost about what it would to like buy an old chair, get it, and then reupholster it because that's most likely a thing you're going to have to do. And this comes with a warranty.
I know. Well, I'm sad. I'm happy to disinfect as much as we do, but spraying down with heavy duty disinfectant on my leather right now, I'm like,
you got to keep neatsfoot oil on hand.
Yep. It's sad to see because I've gotten all mine reupholstered in real leather, brown leather to match, keep them original. And I'm like, man, that's like $2,000 worth of leather that I'm spraying Lysol on right now every half hour. I'm like, that hurts a little bit, but it'll be okay. It'll be okay. It's for the greater good.
I will say that choosing the way you disinfect your chairs makes all the difference. Like, just grabbing a random wipe or whatever, no, not when you're dealing with leather. There are things that you can use to properly disinfect them and then condition them afterwards. And because, we have a leather love seat. In addition to all the chairs are distress leather.
Right.
So it's really like, we have wipes for that, and we have spray and the right microfiber and all that good stuff. But care and maintenance, I think, that's something that's lost on people today, is like using the right multipurpose cleaner for the right surface.
Yeah.
And pH. Who knew that the chemistry chapter in barber school for pH would come in handy when it came to like care and maintenance of your stations?
Worth cracking open. I wouldn't say I'd crack open the barber textbook. I might Google it first because the barber textbook is iffy at best sometimes with their...
It kind of all depends on what you're going for.
It gets close. It's one of those like, that's the gist, but...
Generally speaking, the concept is correct.
Yeah, but no. Yeah, it's definitely worth maintaining for sure.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming down and talking to me. I look forward to seeing what Topstone Barber Company has moving forward in Littleton. I have not personally been up to Littleton. I don't get out much.
We'll get you to the North Country one of these days.
I've heard great things from my friends who love to go up there, whether it's to look at guitars or mid-century furniture or anything like that. There are some places to go.
I live above that guitar.
But thank you again for making the trek down and talking to me.
Absolutely.